Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, this video is kind of going to be a little different. I kind of got a little setup going here. And what we're going to do is kind of a how-to video on setting up a bench harness for an LS swap. To be honest with you, it's been one of the more intimidating processes of doing this truck, and it's time. I mean, I'm tired of screwing around with it. So I've got some stuff laid out. Now, there is a lot of videos on this on YouTube. However, I didn't see any that really broke it down. I'm sure I just missed them, but I'm gonna do one where I break it down, and I'm even gonna strip wires and solder and show you how I do it. And we're gonna make a bench harness. The whole purpose for a bench harness, if you don't know, is so that we can reprogram the ECU or ECM, whatever you want to call it, on a bench or next to a computer. In order to do that, we have to build some type of a setup where we can plug in the computer gets power, and something reads the computer. So let's dive into it. Some things to think about are what we need is an OBD2 reader from a vehicle. It almost doesn't matter which one, as long as it's the 2, not one of those first ones. So you need one of these. So get this out of any vehicle, should work. This came out of a GM vehicle. Then we also need part of this part of the computer harness, and it's the blue one. Now I've seen a lot of people hook up both the blue and the red, or the blue and the green, depending. We're gonna try it with just the blue. It'll make it simpler. And on top of that, the only thing the other one does is adds more grounds to it. And I have seen people use just this. So we're going to use that. So these are the 2 used parts that come out of a vehicle. Now, what we need is something to kind of house stuff in. So I got this box from Amazon, and this one is going to hold our OBD2. It's going to hold our switches, which we've got 2 switches. And it's also going to be where our power plugs into. So it's going to house everything that we're going to need, minus this being in it. It'll be attached like this. And then I think we'll probably figure a mounting point maybe on top or something for this guy. And that's going to be our setup. Now we've also got some tools. I've got shrink wrap, I've got a solder gun, some picks, a wire stripper. And again, we're going to be soldering all of our connections. You can, however, use butt connectors or other ways of doing this, but for me, it's just as easy, and I like the quality that soldering does. I'm gonna go and bring you in close so you can see exactly what we're doing step by step on building this harness. Let's check it out. So the first thing we'll go over is the actual wiring numbers and colors. So if you look here, on our OBD2, which is that guy like we talked about, we are going to have 4 different wires, and that's going to be these 4 here, and we need all of those. Sometimes I think that there's an OBD2 that has an extra wire that you actually don't need, but in this case we need all 4. So each one of these, if you can see here, has numbers on them. It's kind of hard to see, but each one of these has a number on it. Then if you flip it over, there's numbers there as well. And then obviously you can see the color. So what I've done is I've got a list of the numbers. So for example, this one here is 16. 16 is orange. Obviously you can see the wire's orange. And it's the purpose of it, or what it does, is a battery positive with constant power supply. The next one down, 5, black and white, is a ground. 4, black, is a ground. 2, purple is for the data link. So that's what we have for this. So that's the setup, and that's how we're going to wire it when we get to that in a minute. Now, on this guy, as you can see, and we're going to tear this apart here momentarily, there is a lot of stuff going on. Wires everywhere. What the heck's going on? Actually, I do know. And we don't need most of that. We need these ones here. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 5 of them. So when we get into this, we're going to be able to see that these also have numbers back here, and they've also got wires with colors. It's the same thing. Position 1, black, ground. Position 40, black, ground. Position 19, pink, battery key. So that's as if we were turning the key on. Position 20 is orange. That's battery positive constant. And then position 58 is a green wire, and that's a data port. So that's the setup. Now, if you want this stuff in a more professional or in a pinout manner, you can go to, I think it's called lt1swap.com, and that'll get you taken care of with that stuff. But this is what you need to know about to get this started. So I just wanted to go over that for a minute. Now, let's dive into the actual tearing apart of this thing, because there's a lot here. All right, so there's two sides that come out of the blue harness, one on the left, one on the right, whatever. So what we'll do first is we're just going to kind of start taking apart this loom and get this tape off. And of course, this was in a truck, so it's dirty and grungy and whatever. But there is an easier way of doing this if you wanted to, by running your utility knife down here, which we might do in a minute. But for now, let's see if we can unwind it, because sometimes that's easier. And as I say that, we've run into a spot that doesn't really, well, there we go. So basically, the whole thing behind this is just get it off. There we go. And then, like I said, I find that sometimes wrapping it is easier. You can run your utility knife down there, but then of course you risk cutting wires. So let's get this out of our way. Bam, one side's done. Now let's do the other. I'll try and go kind of fast here because I think you get the point with one, but I wanted to make this video where I'm really truly going step by step, and I'm going to show you everything that I do, and then hopefully in another video we'll get this thing programmed, and with any luck it'll work. Get this loom part off. All right, there we go. And we don't need the wires this long necessarily, but we got them, so why not? There we go. And these are going to come off pretty good. There. Okay, now we got all of our loom and our tape off, so now we can go to the next step. So the next part's going to be to get this gray cover off, and to do that, there's clips here on both sides. Sometimes you can squeeze them, sometimes you can't, so you can just grab a pick or whatever you've got, and we're going to just kind of push it in there. Get creative on how you kind of go about this. And if you need two picks, use two picks. Not toothpicks, two picks. Okay, so now we've got one side done. Let's do the other side. And I'm actually doing one side at a time here. And there. Sometimes it takes a little persuasion, but you will get it. So now we've got our wires set to the side, and we can kind of straighten them out a little bit and see what we want to do. And then if you look here, and it might be kind of hard to see, but there's numbers all along the top here and the bottom telling you which color wire goes to which number, which is going to correlate with that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through each one and take them out. In order to do that, we've got to take our blue connectors off. So, or blue covers, whatever you want to call it. So if you look here on the side, there is a little bit of a white tab, and there's one on each side. Both of those have to come off. So we're going to use our straight pick, and I'm just going to push down on one tab, pull up, and there it came up just a little bit. While holding that one up still, I'm going to push the other side in, and boom, off she goes. Same on this side. I'm going to push in on the white tab, pull up, and it's up just a little bit. And I'm going to flip it while keeping that up. I'm going to push in on this tab, and off comes the blue cover. Now we've got all of our pinouts, is what these are called. So this is what connects into the computer. So in order to pull these out, the first thing we need to know is which ones stay and which ones come out. Well, again, this is going to tell us which ones stay. So the only ones that are staying are these five right here, 140, 19, 20, and 58. So what I'm going to do is, and it goes all the way to 80. I'm going to start on one side. Get these wires kind of out of my way, and I'll start with the position number 1, which we are keeping. This one is going to be our ground. And if you look here, it's actually kind of hard to see. So I'm just going to scrape some of that stuff off here. And that kind of helps. So in order to pull these pins out, there's a couple different ways of doing this. But what I do and found to be successful is you pull up on this little tab right here, push up on the wire a little bit, and then out. And sometimes a guy really wishes he had 3 hands. And if the wire's not quite stout enough, that technique may not work. So what you can do is just kind of pry up on it and then pull gently, and we've got our first one out. Now this is some green wire that we do not need. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to go through and do this to every one of these until we get to position 19 is the next one that we need to worry about. Okay, so now we are at number 19. So that's this pink guy, which that one we're keeping. So now we've got 2 so far that we're keeping. So I'm going to move on to 20, and we're keeping 20 as well. So now we've got 3 that are going to stay into our bench harness here. So now what we'll do is we will continue on to 40, which will be the next one we keep. So we've got quite a few to go. And a trick that I'm starting to find is if you push up a little bit on the wire, pull the tab out, and then come back here on the end of the wire and push, boy, that really gets that out of there nicely. So we're going to keep doing that. Okay, and here's number 40, our last black one. It's actually black and white. That is it. So now we'll flip them over and take every one of them except for number 58 out. Okay, now we've got our 5 wires that we're going to need to build this harness. So again, we've got 1 which is black, 40 which is black, that's this one. And then we've got green, which is 58, orange, which is 20, and pink, which is 19. And those are the wires we're going to need. So now what we need to do is start figuring out how we want to get this set up. So let's go ahead and bring everything out as far as our housing for this and kind of decide how we're going to do it. So I think what I want to do is put the OBD2 in here. So I'll drill a hole right there into the top of the cover. Then we also need a couple holes for the switches. And then we'll put a hole in to each side, one for the plug-in and one for our harness, and we should be ready to go. So I'm going to go drill some holes, and I'll show you what the holes look like. I won't show you drilling them, but I'll go get everything cut out, show you how we're going to kind of get this set up, and then I'll bring it back in. Okay, we are back, and I have my box set up. Now, I didn't show this on camera, but I will explain it because it's really just pretty easy. Takes a little time is all. But basically, I drilled 2 holes here to mount my OBD2, and then I have a hole in the middle for the wires. And then I've also got my 2 switches that I had to square out, and I did that. They're not perfect, but they'll work. And then on the main box, I put a hole on that end and a hole on that end. So that's where we're at with that. Now, let's go ahead and look at the back here. So I've got my two switches, my OBD2. We're going to need to wire in our power, and then we're also going to, of course, need to wire in the rest of our harness here, the connector to the computer. So I think what we're going to do, and I've got some notes here off camera, plus I've got this too. So what I'm going to do is start with, and this is the part that I have found or haven't found people showing a lot of, is the actual wiring. So I've got a little tool here heating up for me, solder gun, I guess you'd call it. I've got my solder handy. I've got shrink tube. All this stuff's off camera, but I've kind of got everything ready for you so that you can at least see how I'm going to do it. Now, whether everybody wants to do it this way, you like we talked about earlier, you can use different ways of connecting these and etc. But this is how I'm going to do it. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hook up all my grounds because that just seems quick, easy. Let's just get that done and out of the way. And they all kind of go together and nothing, you can't really screw it up too much. Well, I suppose you can, but we're not going to. So the first thing we're going to do is these come with these little, well, they're already stripped there. Oh, the other thing is I've got some wire here too, if you can see it. Different colors. I'm going to try and match some of these colors somewhat just so I can keep my sanity. But what I'm going to do is use a little bit thicker gauge wire. And the reason for that is when I was taking this harness apart, some of the wires were thicker than others. So I'd rather go thicker than not. So that's kind of the theory or the thought behind that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I think we'll go ahead and get these two soldered. Now, I do have a diagram, just a crazy little sketch that I got from somebody else's information online there, which I am going off of. So I'm not going to get too in detail with that one because it's not my best drawing. But in all reality, the idea here is for me to show you how to do this. So there's tons of diagrams online and all that if you need that, to have those specifics. So I'm just going to strip these two ground wires. Now these two grounds are from my OBD2 and they are 4 and 5. So these both go to ground, and then of course the two from the switch both go to ground. And however a person wants to tie them in, they've got to get grounded from this point to the grounds on the power and the computer. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some black wire and I'm going to cut two different strips of it. And we actually don't need that much. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and cut this guy in two. About like that. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and strip these. Feel free to fast forward because like I said, I am doing this for those that really want to dive into this and get the nitty-gritty, step-by-step details. Because frankly, I would have liked to have seen something more like this when I was looking. So, all right, now I've got all those done. So what I'm going to do is get my shrink wrap ready. And again, I've got that off camera here. Any shrink wrap that you want to use is fine. Heck, we might even get creative on coloring too. Why not? Or we could just use black. That'd be all right too. So what I'm going to do is just get some of this ready. And one thing I already realized that I don't have ready is some kind of a torch, but I think I have one in my toolbox. At least I hope I do. All right. So I guess we'll go and start with these switches. Now, there are several different ways of doing this. And I'm just going to show you how I'm going to do it. And then you do it however you want to do it. And I can still get the shrink wrap on. And don't forget, I've done that a handful of times where I forget the shrink wrap, and then you got to go back and yada yada. Okay, so now I am just going to kind of get that twisted somewhat tight, out like that. Now, I don't know how well you're able to see this here, but we'll get those ground wires out of the way. Now, there's different thoughts, theories, ways of how to do this. One thing I will do is tin up my not quite hot. It is hot, but it's not quite hot enough to melt the solder, which is unfortunate because I had this thing heating for half the day by accident. There, she's tinning up a little bit now. Well, it's melting it. I don't know if it's tinning. So I should really clean that off. Hold that thought. I'm going to clean this real quick. So I got that cleaned up. Let's try this again. Is it hot enough? Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's not going to work quite as good as I had hoped, but that's all right. So now I'm just going to hold this. I sometimes like to go to an angle. Get that copper real hot. And when it is, everything should melt and it should create a good contact. So this part takes a little bit of time and I can't really do much about that. I suppose if you wanted to actually learn how to solder, you could look up a how to solder video, but well, it's starting to want to take a little bit here. Not great, but there she's cooking. All right, now I'm going to pull that off. Set my iron over to the side. And I think they say a 10-pound test is what you want to do on these to see, but oh yeah, that would be successfully soldered together. Not the prettiest, but hey, if it works, it works. And that's my shrink tube. So now we're going to do the same thing over to the OBD2 wires. And all I'm doing is spreading them a little bit, getting my new wire, spreading that one just a little bit, put them in, about like so, and then twist. And it doesn't always work great. And these are different thickness little strands in there, so there we go. Well, same thing. I don't like these wires that stick out. I mean, they don't usually hurt much, but while she's heating up, I can get them in there a little. It's all right. And I'm not the greatest at soldering, just so everybody knows. It's not my best thing. Now, there are these little hooks that I used to have. I don't know what I did with them. But that you can use to hold this stuff, but right now we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way. Oops. And a lot of times you can tell because the actual sheathing on this stuff will start getting a little rubbery looking. That's a good indicator that we're hitting a fairly decent temperature with the copper in the wire. And sometimes if you need, and I can even smell it heating up, sometimes if you need to, you can come at it at a different angle too. he's wanting to take. And you can just hold it like this too. Now it's getting pretty toasty. So I might use the soldering iron here to help melt it in a little bit. From all sides. There we go. Let it cool for a second. And we'll give it our 10-count test. Oh yeah. All right. So we got our 2 ground wires. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do this again, because we need to get this side of the plug-in for the ECU and then something going to our power. So the best way to do this, I think, is I may end up de-pinning this, or I guess I could start just getting these wires in. I suppose I should make sure that everything's going to fit in that hole that I drilled. Pretty close. I might do this hole a little bigger anyways, because I'm going to put some tape on these. So I think I will really. Yeah, they're all going to fit, but I want tape to. I'm going to be able to tape these. I think what we'll do is I can de-pin them, and I'll do that later. We'll pull the pins out and put them back in. For now, we're just going to focus on getting this stuff soldered up. Right. So basically, and I'm going to look here, we've got 2 blacks, and I think one of them we don't need to use. If you can see there again. One of them we don't need to use. Where are we at here? Here we are. But I'm going to use both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and strip them. And if you want to fast forward, if this is not your pace, totally do it. Because if you already know how to solder and figure some of this stuff out, don't let me bore you. This is for people who, well, just maybe are struggling or want a little bit more information on it. Okay, so as you see here, we've got, it's a little longer than it probably should be, but that's all right. We've got all of our grounds put together. So just double them up to a single, double to single until you come up with just one. So that's pretty basic, not too terribly hard. Believe me, if I can figure it out, you can. So now what we're going to do is we are going to hook up our power source, our constant power, to each other. And this one's pretty simple because the two middle ones on this switch that I got, which of course I got the wrong one there, these two middle ones are what's going to give us constant power. When we turn the switch on, either one, it's going to go out here to either the PCM, ECU, call it what you will, or to the OBD2 port. So now we're just going to put these two together into one, and then we'll have everything that's going to plug into the wall ready. Then we just need to wire our switches and our data link. So I'm going to dive into that now. Okay, so we got that one soldered. Give it the 10-pound tug. Good to go. Let her cool down for just a second. And I'm going to just keep going with black because for shrink wrap, because why not? So now these two are going to go straight into our power converter, or our 120 volt to 12 volt. And that's it for that part, which we'll do here in a bit. So now what we need to do is figure out where our switch powers are on. So the two things we need to power up is the OBD2 and this guy. So that's going to be well, let me look at our list. The OBD2 is going to be the orange, is going to be our constant battery. So that will be on all the time. I just caught my paper on fire. Don't tell anybody. I caught it in time. I caught it. We're good. So let's see here. Stop. All right. So the first switch, which is going to be, we'll just call it switch one, the one in the middle. This one is going to go to straight to our number 20 constant power on this, which if we go to our list, number 20 constant is orange. So red to orange here. These two just get soldered together. So now what happens is 19 from our ECU harness to orange 16 on our OBD to our switch. So that's going to be constant power, I believe, unless I've horribly got that backwards, which I very well may. Either way, it's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and strip these. And I'm going to see if we can't put all three of these together. And I did not put shrink wrap on this one. Okay, so there we have it. We officially have everything soldered that's going to be soldered. On the power end, it's got this plug and play deal, an adapter kind of thing, so you can unplug it if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all this up. I'll show you everything at the very end, then I'll show you how to test it. But I think what I'm going to do is take you over to the whiteboard so you can see what all this is doing other than me just soldering a bunch of wires together. I think everybody kind of understands the ground. Hopefully you understand the main power going into the switches. And then everything else is just kind of powering either the ECU or the OBD2. And then we've got our communication or our data link. So that's really all it is. But let's go look at the board and see what we got. All right, so here is my extremely crude drawing on how this works, but I think it'll illustrate the point. So if you want to pause it here so you can write this down, draw it on your own, whatever. This is it. My OBD2 plugin is a little off. That's fine. You're going to get the idea. So the first thing we did was we connected all of our negatives. So here's a negative. Here's a negative. We have a ground from this is our plugin for our computer. We have two grounds from our OBD2, and they both go to the ground on our power. Now, anywhere you see a little circle at a junction is where I soldered it. So we saw that when I was doing it. So the ground's taken care of. And I'm just going to knock this one out. The OBD2 communication to the ECU plugin, that's right there. Boom. There is a little that I forgot to mark solder point in the middle, but you get the idea. It's just one straight continuous run. Then what we have is we have our two constant powers to our switches, and that's all it is. One switch goes here. Anytime you see a loop like that, it means it's not connected and it goes next to or by that wire that it's looping over. So we've got those connected. We saw me do that. So our power switches are connected. Those are the only two that go straight to our power. Our power's done. Now the switch power is what the switch means. That's pretty simple and basic too. The switch goes, this one, the first one, the main power, or the constant, goes to 20. And let me check that out. So our main power, like we had on our sheet, which is that middle switch, goes straight only to the ECM or ECU plug-in, and that's constant power. The second switch, or the key switch, goes to the ECU and the OBD2. So the OBD2 only gets power when the key's on or when this switch is on. Boom, we just wired it. I hope that makes sense. Let's go check out the finished product. Now, we didn't go in this in perfect order. However, I think it illustrates the point, and that is how to wire this and what the wire diagram looks like. Now, if you look here, this is how I've done it. So this is my power cord. This is that ground and power source. And then all I did was kind of tape it up, and you can see the inside here of what that looks like, how everything kind of looks once it's in here. And you can do this however you want, and it's not that big a deal because everything's going to end up being tucked in here. So what I'm going to do is just kind of, and you can tape this up, and I may come back and tape this up more again. I'll just kind of tuck everything in, and that is on. Now there's this rubber gasket thing you can put in. You don't have to. I don't know if it matters. I probably will. And then just screw this in. So that's how it works. Now, before you screw it in, I'm going to show you how to test this to make sure it works. So this is going to be, again, very basic. So if you know how to do this, well, skip this part. But there's a lot of people, I think, that don't. So I'm going to show you. So this is a fancier fluke meter. If you have a meter, you could even use a test light for this purpose. But if you have a meter, I think you're going to want to put it on 20 volts. This one automatically goes where it needs to. And when you test it, you don't want the ohms, which is horseshoe mode. You want the V with the little thing that looks like a road, because that's DC power. So I've got that on here. Now, the other thing I've got that you're probably not going to have are these super pointy ones. And that's in order to get into this thing. So you want to figure that out. And if you need to de-pin it and pull it out and just use the ones that come with your multimeter, these guys, that's okay too, because it's the same thing. That way you know. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So the first thing you want to do is plug in your newly made benchtop harness here. And I'm going to turn it over. Now, if I were to do this over again, I would not use these square style lights. I'd use a round toggle switch because it's a lot easier to put in, a lot quicker, and I'd get something with a light on it. These ones don't have lights on them. So I'm going to go and put them both in the off position, and I'm going to put the ground into the ground pin because it should be grounded. And then, and if you can see here, here's my meter. And what I'm going to do is turn on my first switch, which is my main power. And then I'm going to go to the orange one. And I got it in the wrong one there. Okay, so something is not right. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. There we go. So now we've got 12.29 volts. So that is ideal. That is really good. Now I'm going to turn it into the one next to it, which is the key on power. It should read 0. And it's jumping all over a little bit at 0.01, whatever. That's perfect. Now look what happens when I turn the key switch on. Now we got that 12.29. So everything is working the way it should. Go back to constant power, key switch power. And you can play with this, shut switches off, have the time of your life. No matter. But now we've tested this to make sure it works. So here's our finished product. Came out fine. As long as it works, who cares? Now you can change this up however you want. It doesn't matter. If you want to use a residential box, one of those deals, you can. Shoot, when I first did one of these, I wasn't even using a box. I just had everything out and was going to plug it in. And so use what you got, do what you do. Don't let this keep you from building your truck, or your rig. Just get it done, and it's really not that difficult. So the next thing we're going to do on the harness part, or the benchtop harness, which won't necessarily be the next video, but we're going to program the ECU for this truck. So that's going to be another exciting thing. And I'll get into all that and show you on the computer kind of how I go about it. I've never done that part of this. I've messed around with the harnesses, I've messed around with wiring and all that stuff, but I've never actually programmed an ECU. So it'll be a learning thing for me too. All I care about doing is getting this thing running right now. I'm not trying to tune it. I'm not trying to do anything. Just get rid of the VATs and the rear O2 sensors. And I think that's all we need. So be waiting for that video because it will come out hopefully in the next few weeks and we'll see if we can't get that taken care of. Thanks a lot for hanging out. Hopefully you get something out of this video. If you've got any questions at all, let me know. Throw it in the comments. I've been trying to be real good about replying to those. So hopefully you guys get something out of this. Hopefully you learned. Hopefully you get your project rocking and rolling. We'll see you on the next one.